Hey, everybody. The Next Lawyer Up podcast is sponsored by Bond and Botus. You can find us at bondandbotus.com. That's BONDANDBOTES.com. We practice in the areas of consumer bankruptcy, consumer law, including collection and telephone harassment, credit report issues, tax issues, security clearance issues, Social Security disability, and VA disability. So, with that, let's start the show. This episode of the Next Lawyer Up podcast features Tommy Siniard. Tommy is with Siniard, Timberlake & League. His main office is here in North Alabama in Huntsville, but he handles cases statewide and nationwide. Tommy is a great guy, which you'll hear in a minute, and you can see that for yourself. His name is, if you know a lawyer in Huntsville, the name you probably know is Tommy Siniard. Great guy. He's been hosting a show on ABC Sunday nights called Law Line for as long as I've been here, so at least over 22, 23 years. He hosts that every Sunday night at 10:30, which is not a great time for me, hour-wise. But great guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. Well, Tommy, appreciate you coming and talk to me today.
Thank you, Ron. I'm thrilled to be here.
So it's good to see you. You know, what I wanted to start with, and my son Tom, I go to bed early, and my son Tom was watching. Well, you don't on Sunday nights, right?
No. You're right there.
But my son Tom was watching Law Line with my wife Patty, and you were on last night, right?
Right. I was there until the wee hours. That's right.
So you've been doing Law Line, and as I mentioned in this introduction, that's on ABC here, WAAY, right?
Right, Channel 31.
How long have you been doing that?
We celebrated, and we had a little party for it, 20 years this summer. 20 years of every Sunday night for trying to bring that information out.
Right.
So it's been a great fun thing for me. It's been a blessing to our firm and to my practice, and I hope it's been helpful, to the Tennessee Valley, North Alabama, and South Tennessee.
Well, you've been kind enough to have me on there several times, and I appreciate that. Though my problem is I'm not a night person.
You're very stellar. Of course, your firm is the gold standard in what you do in bankruptcy, and you try to act like you're not
Tommy, you're too kind.
Effective on the air,
kind.
But I was scared you were going to take my job after your last visit.
You are too kind. No, but so what I always tell my wife, so if on those Sundays that I'm on, and you've had me on, like I said, I think I've been on a couple times this past year, but I have to take a nap during the day. Otherwise, I feel vacant. Like I'm the kind of guy that didn't study at night. I mean, I just couldn't. And so I felt kind of vacant if I'm not rested.
I'm with you. And the other problem with that, for the first, I guess, 10 or 12 years, I did it every Sunday night by myself, 52 weeks a year, or I was a host. We had younger lawyers from our firm, then Michael and Will, that would come on, but I had to be there every Sunday night, and you can't help but develop some adrenaline,
right.
And then you go home and you're wide-eyed, and then Monday for lawyers that go to court, Monday's the hardest day,
right.
So it was always a test there on Mondays. And as I get older, it's
more of
harder.
A test, right?
Yes.
Well, that's why I asked you today. I felt a little bad that I knew you were coming here today, which is Monday that we're doing this.
I'm fine.
Yeah. And what was last night's show? It was about DUI?
DUI, we had George Flowers on, who is with Phil Price,
right.
Price and Flowers.
They're the gold standard of what they do.
They're the gold standard on
right.
DUI. And this time
right.
of year, we always try to put out the message of the horrors that occur
right.
with the drinking and driving, and it goes up during the holidays.
Right.
And then teach people some of the rules and the law and the consequences
right.
of it. And George and Phil do a great job.
Yeah, no, they're good guys. But, so how long have you been here in Huntsville?
Well, I had a clerking job here in the summer of 78. I started law school in 77. and I did a clerkship for the summer with Walker Morrison Smith, Harvey Morris, who's still around, still a great guy, who was my mentor then and love him to death now. And then they invited me back to clerk the next summer. And then at the end of that summer, they offered me a job. So my first day on the job as a lawyer here in Huntsville was August the 1st, 1980. So I'm starting my 37th year of practicing law here.
Well, at least we're in a field, right, that the older you get, right, if there's one benefit of age, the older you get, the more you've seen, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, some things I tell my son, who's now practicing with me, some of the things that you learn, like at any job, is not in the books. You know, it's in the creases, and it's in the relationships, and it's in the feel of things. And so maybe the only benefit of aging is that experience that lets you take this piece of knowledge and a shortcut here and a relationship there and turn it into something fruitful.
Well, you know, I want to go back a little further, but before I do, you just mentioned something, and that's relationships. To me, when I see you and your name and how you interact with people and just the regard you're held in, the high regard, relationships are so critical, right? And I'm bad at it. I should be much better. You know, I'm good at it when I get to know someone, but to step out, hey, I mean, that's not me.
You know, but
it's critical.
I'd love to say that's something I trained for and worked for. I was born with that. My mother never met a stranger, and I love all kinds of people. I love to hear myself talk, my wife says. I like small talk. I like getting to know other people. I'm curious about what other people do. So that's just something I landed with as a blessing. And
that's a big blessing.
And I think it has been, because I think lawyers come across sometimes as not approachable.
Sure.
And I've always wanted to be the one that was, or a one that was, like you are. And so that's just something I showed up with from my mother's gene pool, and it has been a blessing for me.
No, and that's great. And that's something I have to step into, because it's not. I'm more, I won't say introvert, but I'm more quiet. I mean, kind of on the sidelines or looking at stuff through a lens. But it's such an important skill. I think that and work ethic to me brings you home.
Well,
right?
I appreciate it. I've also been blessed with that. You know, my folks were blue collar people. They got married out of high school.
Well, no, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Gadsden, Alabama, and my dad worked for 43 years for the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company as an electrician.
Now, is Goodyear still open? Or
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It doesn't have the capacity that it once did. At one time, it was the largest radial passenger tire plant in the world.
Well, you talk about a company town. That's Gadsden then, with that Goodyear.
Yeah. So Gadsden really had two horses. It had Republic Steel, a steel plant that's now closed.
Where is that at in Gadsden?
It's closer to Attala, really, on the Gunnersville side of Gadsden. Right. And then Goodyear. And so my dad spent 43 years at Goodyear. He missed 13 days of work on sick leave in 43 years.
That's crazy.
And at the end,
when he was sick on those days, you were like, Dad,
he was
don't be lazy.
he was an Iron Man, and he believed if you got paid, you're supposed to go to work, and your handshake was supposed to be good for something. And so at the end of 40 years, they found out or gave him an award for the best attendance in the history of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And for that, he got a Goodyear radial tire ashtray, a little tire, $100 check, and a Timex watch. Right. And
now, what about a set of tires? Right?
Well, you got discounts on tires, and we use those. But they somehow, my mother worked. She was a housewife, but worked some years when both my sisters were at the University of Alabama.
What now? How big is your family?
I have two older sisters. Okay. They're both retired school teachers. They Paula, my oldest, was a high school guidance counselor and English teacher in Scottsboro, and she got high school guidance counselor of the year 1 year, and very great school teacher. And then came to Grissom and was a guidance counselor in her last 10 years. And my sister Susan was an elementary school teacher, 2nd and 3rd grade. And
where did she teach at?
Most of her career was on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in Ocean Springs. But when they retired, they moved to Huntsville. So I have had the luxury of having my sisters around. And the older I get, the more I realize how lucky I am,
Right,
because
right.
we get along great. We have a great time.
Right.
And it's not that we hadn't had our differences, for
Right.
God's sakes, but
Everyone does. Right?
but they're doing well, and they're enjoying their retirement. So I'm lucky in that regard.
So you grew up in Gadsden?
Grew up in Gadsden, in West Gadsden, Alabama.
Now, where did you go to high school?
Went to Gadsden High.
Okay.
And then went to the University of Alabama, as my sisters had done ahead of me. And my parents miraculously, and only through adult eyes, do I sense how hard this must have been, paid for my undergrad degree and law degree, and my sister's undergrad degrees and master's degrees at the University of Alabama. And we had a car. It wasn't a new car. And we were in fraternities and sororities, bless their heart. And so if we didn't have much, they didn't let us know it. But, I guess collectively, the most money my parents ever made in a year is maybe $40,000. They paid their bills the day before they do. They tithed to their church. They gave to every charity. That's the last generation, the great generation. They were that. So I just landed in a great family that did their job for their kids, and never looked back and never regretted it.
So when you're in high school, when do you know you want to go to law school?
It's a funny story, because my sixth grade teacher, Elizabeth Turner, as you can imagine, I made good. You might not imagine this. I made very good grades, but I had difficulties with the conduct grade. Back in the day, you got a grade for conduct. And I would come home with all A's and a B or C in conduct, and that would get me punished at my house because I had this gift for gab and couldn't keep my mouth shut. And at some point, Miss Turner's father was an attorney, and she said, "Tommy, you know what? You ought to be a lawyer." Well, I never met a lawyer, didn't know what a lawyer did. And she said, "You like to talk, you like to argue, you're good on your feet, you're good with people. You ought to think about it." So that was the seed planted. And then from there, my natural interest was more arts and sciences type stuff than math. Right. Like English.
Doesn't that afflict most lawyers, right?
I was an English major, political science double major. I liked history, psychology. And when it came down to writing an answer, like a geometrical equation, you couldn't BS that. So I didn't like that so much. But I did okay in math, but I took mostly in undergraduate school, arts and sciences type courses. And then you get to the end of the line there and you go, wow, what am I going to do with this English degree? Right. And it was a good preparation for law school. And I'd had that thought in the back of my mind for years. And because I took political science, that sort of steered me that direction. And I applied and somehow got in and somehow got out.
You mean to Alabama's law school?
Right, to Alabama. My son graduated 3 or 4 years ago from Alabama, and he was like summa cum laude, and he thinks I'm real smart. And he said, "Dad, I said, it's great you got summa cum laude." He said, "What part of the class were you in?" I said, "Son, I graduated in that portion of the class that when it was over, we said, 'Thank you, Laude. Thank you, Laude.'"
That's funny.
I did okay. I was in the top half of my class, but I wasn't even
getting into Alabama.
Ron Sykstus.
Getting into Alabama now is brutal.
Oh my goodness! It's the top public law school in America for the money. Right. And in the top 10 or 12 period. And when he got in, I doubt I could have gotten in or gotten out. It was difficult when I applied. There were 2,200 applied and 180 taken.
You're kidding.
And I had like a 3-4 QPA and some pretty good things I'd done on the side, and I'd worked, and I got in off the waiting list, and that was with some begging.
Right. Well, you were their undergrad, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And no, I didn't ask you. So, what fraternity were you in?
I was a KA, Kappa Alpha, and all my boys were. Okay. And, we've got a bond there. And my stepsons, too. I have 3 stepsons. So there's 6 boys in my family. And, 5 of them were in a fraternity. Gotcha. One of them didn't like it. But, we had that little bond
Right.
and enjoyed that together. And so it gave you a little home away from home at the University of Alabama.
It's funny. So, I'm not from here. I don't have your accent, right? So I went to University of Arizona from Chicago just because I wanted to, get away. And Arizona was pretty cheap when I went there. I was in Tucson. So I got put in a dorm that was a World War II barracks, and it didn't have air conditioning.
Wow.
So the first night I'm there, it's 107. And, people say it's a dry heat. I'm like, I don't care.
107's 107.
Yeah, it was brutal. I couldn't sleep. So I pledged Sigma Chi because they let you move in the house literally same day. And they called it swamp cooling there. They had those big units on top of they called it evaporative air, and it ran water. So
that's a perfect reason
I was
to be
in there. I was literally in that dorm room for 3 days and then out.
Wow.
But in Sigma Chi at Arizona, it was life-changing for me because I saw all these guys that, I remember like the seniors in our fraternity, when I was a freshman, they were superstars,
Oh, yeah.
I was like, this is unbelievable. How do I get to that level, right?
And just the different walks of life.
Right.
It's a microcosm, sort of a privileged microcosm. I was in a fraternity, and I don't know if you remember the book, The Prince and the Pauper, but I was on the pauper end of that.
Right.
Because I didn't come to my freshman year in a Maserati or a convertible Corvette Stingray like some of my pledge brothers did.
No, it was really good. So both my two youngest sons are at Alabama right now. They're ATOs.
And they're great kids. I know them both.
So
I know
thanks.
You're so proud of them.
So, yeah, very proud of all three of my boys. Well, let's talk about, so one thing you'd mentioned that your son Bart's practicing with you.
He is, and Bart is...
So of all your kids, he's going to be the only one that goes to law school?
It looks like it. He's my oldest, and he's been with the firm 3 years, and my partners convinced me, and they were right, that the first year he shouldn't work under me, that they should have the right to haze him.
Tommy, you don't talk to him, right? You say you can see him for dinner.
And they did a great job, and so for the last 2 years, we've been together with William Maservi, works directly under me, and we have 4 great paralegals directly in our little pod. We have 9 lawyers and 21 paralegals, but my little pod's me and my son and William, and then we have 4 paralegals.
Right.
And so we work on everything together, and we've got a great little team, had the best year we've ever had the most fun I ever had.
No, that's great. Well, so let's go. So you graduate law school.
Right.
Again, not top of the class like Bart.
No,
right?
That's not good marketing, but I was in the top half. Let's say that.
All right, so
because that's true.
You graduate law school, then what do you do?
I came with a firm that allowed me to clerk with them.
Right.
I loved Huntsville when I came up here. Gadsden was sort of dying on the vine. Gadsden's population has decreased by half since I left. Huntsville's more than double.
Right.
So I just got fortunate to end up here, and so came to Huntsville and started work with that law firm as an associate, and then at some point there was a split of that law firm on good terms, and we went with what is now a fraction of it is Wilmer Lee. It was Tennant Lee.
Okay, sure.
Dag Rowe, John Evans, Jim Cleary, who's one of the most brilliant old legal minds now deceased in Huntsville, John Barron, David McDowell, Harold Bailey.
Those are all big names.
Most unique law firm because we did everything under the sun. So Harvey did criminal work, and Mr. Cleary represented banks. So it would be nothing to go into our waiting room at Cleary Lee, Morris, Smith, Siniard, Evans, and Rowe, and see there would be a banker waiting to see Mr. Cleary and a bank robber waiting to see Harvey.
That's funny.
And everything in between. So it was really my post law school education because you could go to anybody in that firm, any area of law, and get a question answered.
So what kind of work were you doing? Were you specializing at that point? Or you were just like anything else doing what paid the bills? We
did, when I worked with Harvey, we had a general practice, but I loved what he did and how he did it. Harvey was a criminal lawyer, and he did civil litigation. He was fearless of the courthouse and the courtroom, and that is not for everybody. Right. But again, through adult eyes, he drugged me everywhere he went. I got to know everybody in the courthouse, which is something young lawyers don't do anymore,
Right.
get to do.
Right.
And got thrown into trials in criminal settings. There's not a lot of discovery and plowing.
Right.
It's draw.
Right.
And so that helped hone my skills as a trial lawyer. And I did that for a decade. And I did everything. The first 4 or 5 cases, first 5 cases I sat in with Harvey were murder cases. And I thought that's what lawyers did,
Right,
represent
right,
people that kill
right.
people. But then as time went on, I handled my own caseload of criminal cases. And because I was younger, more of them were misdemeanors than felonies.
How did that work back then? Was it all appointed work, or was it just these are paying clients?
These were paying clients. Harvey in the day, in the 80s and into the 90s, was the name to go to, and you can go back and look at who was the name, Mr. Jeff Smith once upon a time, and then Harvey, and then Mark McDaniel,
Right.
and Sandlin, and who's the police officer that went back to law school, and his brother, Tootin.
Oh, yeah.
And others. There are other great criminal lawyers, but Harvey was sort of the go-to guy, and he was flamboyant, extroverted, social, almost to a fault, and drugged me everywhere he went.
Right.
And so it was a great universe to
Right.
be in. So I learned so much from him, and we never had a cross word. We left the Cleary Lee firm because of conflicts. We would get in these, and I slowly but surely started doing workers' comp because
Right.
my daddy, when I left, he said, look,
When you say conflicts, you mean attorney-client conflicts with your firm.
right. So Lieutenant Lee and John Evans represented State Farm, so if we had a case against State Farm and a car wreck case,
Right.
we couldn't take it.
Right.
So a lot of good business, good cases went out the door. So we decided that we needed to split from that. And the friendliest split of a big law firm in the history of Huntsville, we saw it coming. We put markers on the furniture, valued them, had an appraisal,
Right.
got the beer and champagne out, and you got so many points depending on how much interest you had in the firm,
Right.
and you could bid on the different lamps and couches.
That's funny.
And we split, and none of us from that day to this day have ever had a crossword, still call on each other, still socialize. And it was a great firm. The insurance side of that firm went to Wilmer, what is now Wilmer and Lee.
Okay.
Tenant Lee's now retired. And
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, because they do insurance defense. Right.
And so, went through that for, I was there maybe 10 years. And then we decided, Harvey and I, and Joe Cloud was my dear friend who I sent business to when I had a conflict, one of the greatest plaintiff theorists in maybe the country. He joined us. Doug Fees joined us. Gary Conchin was in that firm, Charles Smith. So our idea was, and we built that big building down on Madison Street. They called it the Taj Mahal, and we were
It's now a bank building, right?
Right.
That's the building. Okay.
So we operated as a, quote, big plaintiffs firm there for several years. And, there are a lot of egos in one spot. And,
Right.
and it broke apart piecemeal, but again, not any real gnashing of teeth.
Right.
I was the first one to leave. I just decided after, 11 or 12 years that I thought I could maybe run my own ship. I'd started doing personal injury work in the form of workers' comp because my daddy was a worker, and a promise I made him was that I would never, his view from his blue collar place in life was that all the good lawyers got, quote, bought off to the high end of the street, to big industry, big business, insurance companies. And he said, stay true to your race and represent the little guy. So I started doing workers' comp, which was, workers' comp doesn't pay a lot in legal fees, but I liked it. I was comfortable with that clientele. And they were loyal. Once you helped them, they sent their friends and family. So I developed a pretty good little following from workers' comp, and I was taking that from just workers' comp to car wrecks, and I tried my hand at medical negligence cases and was one of the few that was winning those, and products liability and various injury cases. And so me and a secretary, left a big firm and started with 90 cases, and it's grown into
and just
today,
you and your secretary.
Yeah, it's now grown into 9 lawyers and 21 non-lawyers or paralegals, and it's just been a great ride.
So the building you're in here in Huntsville, now you do cases statewide, right?
We do, and some in South Tennessee. Heath Brooks is licensed in Tennessee,
okay.
And so we handle cases in Tennessee. Not my cup of tea because the law is so very different. But
and you and I have talked previously. You do some FTCA, some Federal Tort Claims Act cases. Those are nationwide cases,
we do,
right?
We do, and we've handled cases in many different states.
Sure.
But, as I got older and more responsibility with my children and coaching ball,
right?
It's one of these things you could run the rapids all over the country and try to pound your chest and make a big national name for yourself, or you could be a father, and they were sort of mutually exclusive. And I don't regret the decision I made to stay local or North Alabama.
Right.
And proud of being able to say, yeah, I helped them grow up. I watched them grow up. Wasn't perfect, but
your son Riley and my oldest son Jack are they are the same age. They played football against each other for years at Huntsville.
Jack's a tough cookie.
Well, when they played, just Riley and that whole group, they had very good teams.
Yeah. Now Riley, the one of my group that made a college athlete was Riley. He got a full scholarship out of Huntsville High. He was a center, and he was the captain and all-state or whatever. And he and Connor Neighbors were teammates and best friends.
Right, I knew
still
that.
Are best friends. Well, Riley got a full ride to Southern Illinois, a Saluki, which was a great.
Right. No, I went to law school at Northern Illinois, so I know Southern. Yeah. I know, and don't they have the Halloween is the big? Yeah, that's the big holiday.
They have a law school, a dental school. Right. It was a 5-year opportunity. It was paid for. I was like, yeehaw!
Right.
So he stayed.
So you need to do that.
Do that, and so he stayed a year there. And Connor called him. Connor had walked on at LSU.
Right.
Been passed over by Alabama, even though he was shouldn't have been because he was such a great athlete, and walked on to LSU, made it under Les Miles, and called Riley and said, "You can make this team. Come walk on." So Riley calls me and says, "Son, let's think a minute now. You're in a good spot.
Yeah, we got a good setup."
He said, "Dad, I'm gonna try it." So he walked on, and he was 3 of 43 that made it as a walk-on.
Wow.
So he played a year at LSU. Never, he made the scrimmage team, but he never made the Saturday game, and called me one day and said, "Dad, I'm not going to ever be anything but Rudy. I'm not everything but a scrimmage player.
Rudy.
You're going to be mad at me if I just come on home and finish at Alabama."
Right.
And I said, "That's all we ever did. Come on." So he finished at Alabama. The benefit of his college playing time is that he is now in graduate school at the University of Denver at Colorado, getting a master's in sports and entertainment management.
Okay.
He's working with an agent. He's got he'll graduate in May. He's made good grades, and he'll do something in the sports world, we hope. And Connor Neighbors went on not only to make the LSU team, started his last.
He started, and I would always see him in those games. He was on TV every week. And
made the All-Star game in Mobile, and was drafted by the Titans, and spent a year with the Titans, and now is assistant strength coach at Alabama, and maybe moving with Lane Kiffin to.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
So it's been a great ride.
But I remember when Jack played with those guys. Yeah, we hated playing. We loved playing Huntsville, but we also hated it, right?
Yeah, Connor was a one-man defense.
Right.
He's unbelievable. He played linebacker and super athlete.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So, so with this, you don't do any criminal defense now, do you?
Well, yes, I do. For friends and family who have run astride the law, drinking and driving, and little things like that. I still go to city court or
I didn't realize
misdemeanor court. People see me over there and go, "Are you lost?" And sometimes I get mad. It's like, I was doing this before you were born.
Right.
But if you see me in criminal court, I'm usually doing a favor for a friend or a child whose parents I know. And But yeah, I still know how to do it. Could do it if I have to.
Right.
I still kind of like it, but 99% of what I do is civil plaintiffs work, injury work, which you almost have to apologize these days for because of the tacky commercials. And,
right.
But I was doing it long before those folks were born as well.
What do you think of that angle? Some of these commercials kind of promote the angle of "I'll keep you out of court."
Well, I'm not here to demean anybody, but if you're going to represent somebody, you can't do it halfway. It's sort of like saying, well, I'm the lifeguard, but I'm not going to jump in if you're drowning, really. If I can just pull you over to the side, I'll do that. Right. You're either a lifeguard or
your
you're
leverage
not.
is court, right?
Yeah, you're a lifeguard.
That, to me, the leverages will go to a jury if we have to.
Right. So there are these firms that just hustle large volumes of cases, settle them for 50 cents on the dollar or less. The insurance companies know that, and they do a good job with their marketing, and but they don't finish the job. And so I'm proud of, and I sound like I'm bragging, but if it's a broken finger or a broken neck, we finish what we start. And always have and always will if I'm breathing, and we don't just say, come to us if you've got a terrible big death case. We handle everything from soup to nuts and injuries, and try to give information in other areas of law to make this less angst about talking to lawyers.
Right. What I wanted to back up just a bit and ask you, so the building you're in, did they used to be an antique shop way back when?
So that building predates.
It's on Holmes Avenue, right?
Right. It was built before 1900. It has been a little bit of everything. It has a very interesting history. It has been a ladies' ready-to-wear. I have a picture of in 1922 when it was a tire store, and tires were about as wide as your fist.
How big is that building square footage wise?
It's 11,000 square feet, but that's in 3 stories.
Right.
So it's long and thin. But T.T. Terry's family owned it at one time. He's a kind of an old school Huntsville icon. And Lord, it's been a little bit of everything. Randy Scrimpture owned it before us. And of course, he was one of Huntsville's leading commercial construction people. And the market turned down and they needed to get rid of it, and we got it for a deal, and it's turned out to be a pretty great spot in the world.
No, you're right across from that new whatever's being built now.
The Avenue.
Yeah.
It used to be
that's
huge. A parking lot a year ago.
That's huge.
And so, there's 1,000 people across the street in the new Avenue, which is really nice, new, brings this new zest to downtown Huntsville, which is growing leaps and bounds.
When I would park there to go to federal court, so when it was the parking lot, and then they had, street parking with metered street parking, so your building's right across the street. So I always thought about, where do your clients park now?
Well,
is that a good question?
That's a good question. The city of Huntsville has been kind enough, and Mr. Seeley, who developed this, to give us some spaces in the Avenue parking garage. Okay. And the city's provided some street side parking, with enough spaces for clients. Our employees have been parking in the old Heritage Club parking lot that's owned by now Frederick Lanier. And I don't know how long that will last before that corner becomes something big and different, but we may do okay.
Well, that's a nice setup. I like where you're located.
It's a good spot in the world. It's close enough to the courthouse and far enough away and got room. And when I bought it, I thought, boy, I've really outdone myself. There was maybe 6 or 8 of us. And I'm buying this huge building, got a great deal on it. And now we've got people working in the closet. So we filled it up for good or for bad.
So do you have all 3 floors? Is that all you?
Yes,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's funny. I always thought maybe there was something else on that 3rd floor. Or maybe it was just storage.
No, the basement, as we call it, has, a suite of offices and a bathroom. And there's a workout room down there that you can tell by looking at me has low miles on it.
Well, it's so hard, and that's what I was telling someone else not too long ago. In this field, it's so hard all I can do is I get up early to try to work out, right? But it's so hard. Like even this morning, I'm like, this is the last thing I want to do.
Oh, I know. So until I was 50, I had all these kids I was coaching, and I was in great shape. I had older sisters I made fun of because they were heavy, and I never was. I never had to watch what I eat. And then I had both hips replaced, and the kids' ball games ended, and I quit coaching, and then, gained 10 pounds a year for 10 years and roll tide.
Well, it's so easy to put on weight. That's what my experience has been.
So my sister Paul is in for Thanksgiving, and she had, being the baby brother, I'd always talked about being heavy, and they both lost, both my sisters, over 50 pounds. My sister Paula, not a comedian, grabs my gut and says, "Brother, what are we going to do about this?" And I said, "Well, sis, I'm thinking about getting my stomach stapled." And she immediately said, "To what? The breakfast bar at Shoney's?" So funny. Karma's hell is answered that. But I work on it, but I sure do like a cheeseburger.
No. What kind of? So you have a workout room there?
Oh yeah,
well, that's neat.
Yeah, I have to dodge workout.
No, what do you have? What do you have?
I've got one
at
home. I've got one at the office. I have to. I used to list all the sports I did on my resume, and now I list as my hobby collecting sports equipment.
Right. You need to put your clothes on,
yeah.
Right? Isn't that the way?
Yeah, we've got a full in the basement of our office. We've got a full nice gym with treadmills. And,
right. That's funny.
But it's like I say, it's got low miles.
So you mentioned that. So your son Bart is with you, and I think I told you before we started this today that my son Tom, of all my three boys, Jack, Tom, and Sam, Tom is the one who may follow me into law. And
I've heard that, and I know you're excited.
I am. But I guess my question is, how do you? You've kind of answered it already. I think that's a great idea when your partners, Will and Michael, said, "Hey, let him work for us for a year. You stay away."
You can't help but sort of favor them or protect them, and that's not a good thing.
Right.
And I've resisted Michael and Will telling me that, but he got treated just like any other brand new lawyer would, or worse.
Well, you remove the father from the equation, right?
And so I think that's a smart way to do it.
Right.
To see, okay, unfettered, there's no place to lean or hide. Treat them just like anybody else. And they did a great job with that. And I'd love to say I have to push or pull my son, or that I'm over bragging, but he's done a very terrific job. He's smarter than his father. His work ethic's good. We get along.
Oh, that's great. On a lot of fronts, it sounds very gratifying.
Just happy, it's not that we don't have our moments, because sometimes he thinks he knows more than he does, and sometimes he's right, but,
and sometimes not, right?
But it's fun. We've had a good time, and we've had a great result with him working with me. So
now I wanted to ask you, kind of going back to, so my son Tom is not yet in law school; he's a senior at Alabama. And I imagine there'll be some law students or prospective law students that listen to this. What advice do you have for people in law school?
Well, first of all, before you go to law school, people don't understand you don't have to have a pre-law major. You can have an anthropology major, a psychology major, an education major, a social work major, a biology major, and still go to law school. So that's good to know. To get in law school, they look at two things, as you know. It's your QPA, your grade point average, and what you make on the LSAT, the law school admissions test. And so 4 hours dictates as much as 4 years.
Right.
And there are prep courses for those, and they help. Once you're in law school, where I was sort of ungoverned or out of bounds, is people don't realize it, but there are no interim tests in law school.
I mentioned that to someone else, and that's a blessing and a curse, right?
So you go 15 weeks without being tested. You've read volumes of material, more than you read in undergraduate school, in a semester, and then you have 5 exams in 3 or 4 days that last 3 or 4 hours. And so it is a terrifying thing. And about Thanksgiving, everybody in law school thinks they're going to fail and wants to quit.
Right.
You can't. You're going to be all right. But it is hard sledding, as you know, that first or second semester, because you don't know what to expect.
You don't know where you stand.
So
and everyone who's talking in class, you think they're the top of the class. I don't even get this point. We had a guy who was
we called them gunners.
Right. The guy who was the number one guy in our class, I'll never forget it. So we read this case, and it was, an 1860s contract case, which is, who teaches from that? But in any event,
right.
I'm not designing the law school curriculum. This guy, so we read it, and this guy, well, so tell me what this case is about, says the professor, asks the professor, and this guy, they call on him, and this guy is so whipsaw smart, and he's like, well, there are 6 different points to this case. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, 6? I've got one issue, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, we had a guy in our law school class that his brief of the case was 5 pages long, and his brief was 28 handwritten pages. And so we had a professor named Blackjack Payne. He said, Mr. So-and-so, you have read us your brief. Now tell us what the case is about.
Right.
So, the thing about law school is being disciplined, because unlike undergrad where you say, oh, I'm going to take this pill and stay up all night and study, you can't do that. There's no catch up where you just skip a night of sleep. You have to do it as you go. Right. And if you don't, you're going to have problems, because a lot of the theories build on each other. If you miss part A, then part C won't make any sense, et cetera.
Well, what do you think of the legal market in Huntsville? You must get a lot of resumes. Do you see people trying to get to Huntsville, or not really?
The legal market since the recession, I think, has shrunk or has not grown at the pace that it has before.
Right.
And I think that's a product of several things, in-house lawyers, consolidation, et cetera. But we're now seeing some growth again in the legal markets, and I think it'll continue to go that way. But there was a period of time, when I guess the first thing you could cut was some of your legal spending when the businesses were doing bad. But, my professor told me there'll always be room for another good lawyer, and there will be, because there's more to know than you can ever fathom. That's why they call it practicing law. Right. And I don't worry the least about your son doing well, and it's a great profession.
Well, the one thing I also like to ask, just as we kind of wrap things up here, I don't want to take up too much of your time, since you got to get back to work since you stayed up late, right?
That's all right.
So if you weren't practicing law, is there anything, do you have any other passion? What would you rather be doing? Or not rather be doing, but you would do it as well?
Here's my story. Like I said, I was raised in a blue-collar family, and I'm not patting myself on the back. My kids make fun of me for acting like I walked school barefoot both ways. But I've had a job since I was 10. I had a paper route, and then I worked maintenance at a golf course after that, and then I worked in college. I worked in law school. I've gotten a W-2 every year since I was 10. And but there was this revealing moment. I was a janitor. When I was a frat guy, I was a janitor for the frat bar, cleaning it up after every drunk had thrown the bottles on the floor. And a guy there said, they're hiring people to do sales over telephones of this, that, and the other, and they pay $10 an hour plus a commission. I'm like, wow.
That's a fortune.
It's inside, and you're not picking up broken bottles out of a urinal. It's like, give me a whirl at that. Right. So I got some formal, cold call sales training, and I liked it, and I did pretty good at it. And from that point forward, all the jobs that I had were as a salesman. Right. Which I tell my kids, if you can sell, you will never starve, because everything in life has some level of salesmanship to it. So if they ran me off tomorrow, I would be a salesman for something, whether it be a charity or a product or a service. I just am comfortable with that type role. If I was more morally pure, I would be a minister, because ministering is something that comes across your path in my field. One day somebody's broken to pieces, and then they're fine, and then they're broken to pieces. Right. So where your life intersects with those in need, you get this calling to try to help, and and ministry is salesmanship to a certain degree. Now, I'm not here to tell you I'm qualified to be a minister and everybody knows me is laughing out loud, but it is in that field,
right,
of being able to talk to people and selling them on the idea that they can do better, or there's this, that, and the other. So something to do with the salesmanship. Right. I would go to if I weren't a lawyer.
I was just
all a lawyer is a salesman, Ron. You know that,
right? And especially if you get to a jury or if you're in front of a judge, that's what it is.
In my world, you get a chance. You sell the client that they want to hire you. You sell the insurance adjuster they should pay. If they don't buy it, you try to sell it to a judge and a jury.
Right.
And so that cheapens our profession. But I worry about kids going forward with how much time they spend on these boxes. And right. I know I sound like a dinosaur, and I get mad at Bart and William. I say, don't text the adjuster, call him. There's an right. art to human conversation. Right. Because what's the difference? I said, well, you can tell if he has a pregnant pause. You can tell if he's bluffing you, Let's don't lose the art of human interaction, communication, passion, because we can take our thumbs and punch buttons.
Well, you make a good point. And I like if we're going to communicate digitally, at a minimum, let's have it by email, because I've got a great record. I can keep the record, right? The text, how do you keep that? Right.
And email, I'm not saying these things don't have their advantages, but it's a tool, but it is not a tool that should scrap human interaction or emotion.
You were talking about sales and how important that is. So when I was in law school, I clerked for this firm, and it was a father and son firm, and the dad was a wise old lawyer. And we represented, I won't name the product, but it was this big national lawsuit against this product that this guy was selling. And he was the regional salesperson for Chicago. And he had a yacht. And so my boss, the wise old lawyer, was like, he looked at me one day, he goes, if you really want to make money, go into sales. Those guys do very well. Get out of the law.
Right.
But again, I told you, I'm not a natural extrovert, so I have to work at it.
My youngest son, Blake, who I haven't mentioned that I'm so proud of, he just graduated from the University of Alabama in December. And he mapped this course on his own. There was a job fair at the university. He went to it. He went to the Pepsi Frito-Lay booth and interviewed for a job for an internship last summer. And they said, look, you've got a B average in psychology. Why are you interested in this? This is basically sales or sales management. He said, because I think I'm good at it. And he said, well, why are you good at it? And he started going out of what he'd talked his parents, me and his mother, out of when he was young, and getting along with 6 siblings, right. And talking his coach into letting him start. They hired him, and he set some sort of record this summer in Nashville. And now he's going to L.A. in sales management with Frito-Lay.
No kidding.
He said, Dad, are you going to be ashamed that I'm a potato chip salesman? I said, no, son, like I said, we're all salesmen.
Right. To one degree or another.
They pay a 401k, a Blue Cross Blue Shield, and a moving stipend, and a good salary.
Sometimes working for the man's not a bad thing, right?
I'm just as proud of him as I am the others. So, and my stepkids too. I'm proud of how well they've done, and good mothers is a
right. That carries the day, right?
I want to bring up about you that I've learned, and is I stay amazed, and not many people know this about. I know what this firm does in terms of those who are having debt problems. I know you advise them sometimes and don't charge a nickel. I know the work that y'all do pro bono, and above that, what you do for veterans. People don't know it, but you served in our military, served in harm's way, and support and have since you started practicing law veterans with veterans' rights issues, which pay you little or nothing. And I get chill bumps talking about it because you're so quiet about it. You know, I'm so obnoxious it'd be on a billboard somewhere.
No, well, I appreciate you saying that,
what you do
Tommy.
for our veterans, and you're one of the only voices, is so much appreciated by me and should be known by everybody.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but like I said, I'm just honored you agreed to come by today and talk to me.
I love you, buddy,
and
I'm proud of what you've done here with this firm. And when you get that next lawyer, we'll go out and initiate him.
Sounds great, Tommy. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So that was Tommy Siniard. Like I said, Tommy is just an absolutely great guy, and as you can hear by listening to him, just one of those people that is just universally respected here in North Alabama and really throughout the state. I mean, that's a guy who really knows his stuff and really has this special ability that very few people have, but when they have it, it's really magnetic, is that, I mean, they just make you feel like no matter how long or how little you've known them, that you're literally their best friend, or that they're completely attentive to you. So it's a really special quality, and no wonder why his clients absolutely love him. So again, really good guy, and I hope you enjoyed that. And again, we're sponsored by bondandbotes.com. That's BONDANDBOTES.com. Poke around our website. We've got a lot of information there as it relates to consumer law, consumer bankruptcy, security clearance, some other stuff. You can also look at security clearance issues specifically at securityclearancedefenselawyer.com. And then finally, for a bankruptcy practice, you can look at bankruptcy. We wrote the book on it, available at Amazon if you just want to poke around there. You can also find that at our website and also at the Bond and Botus bankruptcybook.com. Thanks again for listening.